Group Session 12, Family. Quote, "My family? You want me to talk about my family? How much time have you got?" End quote. Harry. Childhood abuse and neglect happen in a social context. There were people around while you were scared, hurt, or lonely. These people may have known a lot about what was happening to you, had only a partial picture, or knew very little. Whatever the case, these people normally matter. In the previous chapter, you explored your relationship with people who harmed you. In this chapter, we explore the family as a whole. Even if the primary person who harmed you was someone outside the family, your family relationships normally matter concerning what happened. As you read and work on this chapter, you may need to define family in whatever way works. For some, family will be quite conventional: a mother, a father, some siblings, and certain extended family members. For others, family may have been a shifting kaleidoscope of people: biological parents, step parents, partners of parents, step siblings, foster parents, or even people you identified as carers in a residential setting or elsewhere. You should consider family as the significant people who were around you as you were growing up. This chapter represents an opportunity to explore your relationship with these people. This exploration mainly looks back into your past, but also looks at the future. Clarifying roles. The roles that people played in your family are not always straightforward. However, it's possible to consider family roles in terms of perpetrators, victims, protectors, bystanders, and collaborators. 1. Perpetrators. Perpetrators have power and are the ones causing emotional and physical suffering or neglect. 2. Victims. Victims have less power and are the ones on the receiving end of abuse or neglect. 3. Protectors. Protectors will try to shield or defend victims. Sometimes protectors are successful, but sometimes the protector is not strong enough. 4. Bystanders. Bystanders have some power and might be able to intervene and help victims, but they mainly don't. To be a bystander, you have to have enough power to help, but don't. 5. Collaborators. Collaborators have some power. They don't directly cause the harm, but in some way assist the perpetrator. Now for the complicated part. Family members, including yourself, don't always fit neatly into one role. Sometimes a parent can be both a victim and a perpetrator. Sometimes a sibling can be both a victim and a collaborator. A protector can also be a victim. There are many permutations. Maureen was physically and sexually abused by her mother's partner, but so was her older sister, Janet. Quote, "If anything, I think he hurt my sister Janet even worse than me. She would fight back, so it was worse for her. What I can't understand is why Janet would hurt me. She broke my things and punched me when she had the chance. She was horrible to me. He beat my mother too, and most of the time she was too drunk to care about what was happening to us." End quote. Stepfather was a perpetrator. Maureen was a victim. Janet was both a victim and a perpetrator. Maureen's mother was both a victim and a bystander. Family roles are often complicated like this. Exercise 1. Clarifying your family roles. Write the names below of all important family members as you construe your family. Near each name, indicate the role or roles each person played. You can refer to the 5 roles and descriptions above for help. Don't forget to include yourself. Oddly, people we work with sometimes do this. If a significant person, such as an abuser or protector, was not technically a family member, add them too. When you finish your diagram, answer these questions. What did it feel like to do this? Was anything interesting about this exercise? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 1 in the guidebook. Who might have protected you? By definition, people who experienced childhood trauma did not receive the protection they needed. The intensity of anger or disappointment some people feel towards those who might have protected them can rival feelings directed at the people who directly hurt them. Gavin was emotionally and physically abused by his stepmother. Quote, I hated what she did to me, but she was a lunatic and an alcoholic. My dad knew what was happening. He didn't stop her. In a way, I blame him even more. End quote. If the main abuser was a parent or partner of a parent, most often the children will have looked to the other adult for protection. But a child who is vulnerable and frightened will look to anyone they imagine can protect them. It might be another family member, like an older sibling, an aunt, an uncle, or a grandparent. Depending on the circumstances, it might even have been someone who was not a family member. We usually find that there were people who might have protected you. Maybe this person tried to protect you and failed. Maybe they didn't try. Juliet was emotionally neglected by her mother and sexually abused by an uncle. Quote, my father left the family when I was a baby. He lived overseas, and I only spoke with him infrequently. I didn't know my mom was on drugs until I was about 9, but I knew she was never well. My uncle babysat for me, and I was sent to his house a few times a month, and he would sexually abuse me. I hoped my mom could see what was happening just from looking at me, but she didn't seem to. I tried to tell her a couple of times when I was a bit older, but she seemed not to understand. I could never tell my dad because I just didn't know him. It's strange, but I was 18 before it occurred to me that my uncle had been supplying my mom with drugs. End quote. Juliet's mother was responsible for protecting her, but failed to do so. She also appears to have collaborated in the abuse perpetrated by the uncle. Juliet's father also failed to protect her. He had no idea of what was going on, but he had failed to develop a relationship with Juliet in which she might have been able to confide in him. At this point in the audio, there are 2 exercises. Exercise 2, which allows you to explore who might have protected you and why this did not happen, and exercise 3, which is an opportunity to write a letter to someone who did not provide protection. Please pause the audio and complete exercise 2 and 3 in the guidebook. Your relationship with a person who might have protected you. We find that some people have been able to repair a relationship with the person who failed to protect them. Others have not, but are open to the idea of repair. Some have no interest in ever speaking with or seeing this person again. A lot depends on the circumstances of the abuse and how much the person knew about what was happening. A lot also depends on the sense the person who was harmed makes out of why this person did not protect them. Perhaps most important is whether the person who was harmed and the person who might have protected them ever really talked about what happened. What can make things easier is if the person who did not protect can offer an honest explanation and express remorse or regret. Repair is much more difficult if this conversation never occurs or if the person denies or minimizes their role in bystanding or even colluding. What are your thoughts about your relationship now with someone who did not protect you? Is there something you want to discuss with them to attempt a repair? Or do you think this is impossible or simply not necessary at this point? An exercise at the end of this chapter allows you to explore if you want to repair any family relationships. So you can come back to these questions. The other children. Some individuals may have lived isolated childhoods with no siblings. For most, there were other children around as the abuse or neglect was occurring. Many don't come from a conventional family situation. Those experiencing childhood harm may have come from unstable and messy family circumstances, and the children they are in contact with can reflect this. The other children you formed relationships with may have been biological brothers and sisters, cousins, stepbrothers or stepsisters, foster brothers or sisters, or children you knew in a residential setting. The relationships with these other children can vary greatly, but are normally significant in one manner or another. The age difference between you and these other children is often a significant factor in the roles you played. Making sense of the abuse or neglect you experienced happens by comparing your experience to the children around you and the way you and they coped. Like Marie, some were the black sheep of the family. Quote, I don't know why they hated me so much. My parents ignored me or shouted at me, especially my mom. My brother was the golden child. If something went wrong, I was always the one who got punished. I haven't spoken to my brother in 3 years. End quote. There can be several variations on who gets hurt, who doesn't, and how other children respond. Tick what applies below. If there isn't a scenario which applies, write your own at the bottom. Exercise 4. Variations on children's roles. Please pause the audio and complete exercise 4 in the guidebook. Children in the trenches. Marcus described his family in a way which has always stuck with us. Quote, there were 5 of us children, and I was right in the middle. My mom and stepdad were always shouting at each other, or us. Sometimes crockery or chairs would go flying, the dog would be howling, and we would either be hiding or trying to fight back. It was like the 5 of us had been conscripted into a war we didn't want to be in, and we spent most of our time trying to figure out how to survive. End quote. Some people we work with can relate to the analogy between conscripted soldiers and children in a chaotic, unsafe home. However, the important point is that you and the other children around you had to figure out how to cope with whatever was happening. Sometimes children in unsafe circumstances will bond together and form a united front against those who are doing the harming. They might look out for each other and protect one another, even taking the blame sometimes. But in times of threat and chaos, it's also common for children to turn on one another or identify with those who are doing the abusing. Sometimes an older child, rather than protecting others, will become abusive themselves. So perhaps Marcus's analogy to war is appropriate. Soldiers can bond closely when under great stress, but the opposite might also be true. What is almost always the case is that the other children, for good or ill, were important in some way. This is why there is usually a need to talk about the other children in therapy. Exercise 5. Your relationship with the other children. How did you and other children cope together back then? Did you confide in each other and bond together? Or did your childhood circumstances push you apart? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 5. Why family members can avoid speaking about the past. There is nothing commonplace or mediocre about trauma which happens in families. Sometimes, when family members are exposed to trauma, it brings people closer together, and strong bonds and loyalties develop. However, it's not unusual for trauma to push family members away from each other or even blow a family completely apart. Sometimes this is just as it has to be. Perhaps what occurred means that these relationships cannot be repaired, but sometimes it's sad that trauma has put distance between some family members, and repairing a relationship is a part of the individual's recovery. You will probably know what is right for you. Below are explanations of why family members can end up feeling distant from one another as adults. Perhaps you will recognize something. 1. Too risky to speak about. If something really important can't be spoken of, then all that can be spoken about is rather trivial. Sometimes there is distance between certain family members because they were involved in events they feel they can't discuss. The thought of bringing up what happened can elicit anxiety. Martha and her brother were sexually abused by an older cousin. Quote, I was about 7 when it happened, and my brother was 5. He's never mentioned it to me, and I've never brought it up either. Sometimes I want to speak with him about it because I know it messed me up, and I wonder if that happened to him as well. I'm not sure he even remembers it, and I'm worried it will upset him if I bring it up. But there has always been this distance between us, and I wonder if that's what it's about. End quote. There are many reasons why a person might find it difficult to talk about what happened with a family member who was also affected. Sometimes family members dodge each other or keep things superficial as a way of avoiding the subject. 2. Guilt. Complicated and unexpressed guilt can create distance within relationships. When people find themselves sharing disturbing circumstances, guilt is a common emotional artifact. Sometimes people feel guilty because they believe they should have done more. Steve's father physically abused him, his younger sister, and his mother. Quote, I should have stopped him from hurting my sister and mother, but I didn't. I hate that they got hurt the way they did. Every time I look at them, I think about that. It can be hard to spend time with them. End quote. We pointed out to Steve that he was smaller and much weaker than his father, but that didn't make him feel much better. When we asked Steve why he doesn't tell his mother and sister how he feels, the blood runs from his face. Quote, what if they say that I should have helped? End quote, he asks. Like Steve, some people feel inappropriately guilty that they didn't stop the abuse. Others can experience survivor's guilt. They feel bad because they didn't get abused or didn't get abused as badly as another family member. They might have a difficult time discussing it. Whether the other person feels the same way or not, it can feel like an invisible barrier. 3. Family members can trigger traumatic memories. If an individual struggles with intrusive memories, flashbacks, or nightmares related to what happened, it's common for them to cope by avoiding whatever might trigger these experiences. For some, seeing or talking with family members who were there when it happened can trigger such memories. Some people will feel they need to avoid family as a way of avoiding the memories. This can be sad in some cases, as these relationships may be important. 4. Different perspectives or denial. Sometimes what happened does get talked about, but family members discover they have very different perspectives, or someone even denies what the other believed happened. Different views about something so incredibly important can push people away from one another. However, people can remember events differently, especially when the events occurred many years ago. And, as we mentioned previously, children can have very different biological temperaments. This can mean that if two children experienced similar events, for one it may have been bad, while for the other it was truly traumatizing. Whatever the case, different memories and views can create distance as well. 5. Unfair treatment. The feeling of anger is a normal response to a perception of unfairness. If you were abused and someone else was treated fairly well, anger is an understandable emotion. However, it might not feel possible to talk through perceptions of unfairness with someone. It might be really difficult for the other person as well, as they might not feel good about the unfair treatment either, or they may need to suppress it. If anger goes unexpressed and unresolved, it transforms into resentment. It's very difficult to feel close to someone you resent. Exercise 6. Why your family can't speak about what happened. Please pause the audio and complete Exercise 6 in the guidebook. The future. Trauma involves extreme circumstances, and extreme circumstances usually elicit extreme results. In this respect, shared traumatic circumstances can bring people together and build strong bonds and loyalties, or they can push people apart. It often goes one way or the other. If you shared traumatic circumstances with family members, are close to them, and can occasionally talk about what happened in a helpful way, we are pleased. These people may be able to understand what you went through, perhaps better than anyone else. However, your relationships with people you experienced trauma with may be conflictual, distant, or shallow. This is common and one of the effects of historical trauma in families. If you have grown distant from people you shared traumatic circumstances with, there is no specific advice anyone can give you. Your situation is unique. Perhaps you are managing the relationships as you need to, and for the sake of your recovery. Or perhaps talking to someone you grew up with about what happened will allow you to feel closer to them and support your recovery. Sometimes this really helps, as was the case for Marie, who we mentioned earlier in this chapter. She was emotionally and physically abused by both parents, though her older brother wasn't. They hadn't spoken for over 3 years when he called her out of the blue. Quote, I never liked my brother, maybe because I resented that they seemed to love him and hate me. We had never spoken about what happened when we were young. Sometimes I doubt my memory, so I asked him what he remembered. I was really nervous, but he remembered everything just like I did. The times I got screamed at and locked in my room. It made me feel a lot better just knowing that he accepted that it all happened. I hope we will stay in touch now. End quote. Perhaps the relationships you have today with other family members are good and there is nothing that needs developing. Or perhaps these relationships today seem too complex or broken to deal with at this point in your recovery. But perhaps you think it would be useful to try and develop these relationships and even speak about what happened. It's a very personal decision. Exercise 7. Repair concerning a family relationship. Some people feel there is no need to develop or repair a relationship with another family member. However, for others, childhood events had the effect of damaging relationships with people who were and still are important to them. If this is the case, do you want to develop or repair a relationship with a family member who is still important to you? What might you wish to do about this? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 7. This then ends the audio for the chapter on family.